Thank you, Louis and Julia, for coming to do this short interview. I'd like to first start off by asking you to give a short introduction of yourself.
I'm Lous Hoffman. I'm the Executive Director of the Rocky Mountain Humanistic Counseling and Psychological Association, and also a psychologist in private practice, and had been in full-time academia for 19 years before moving to private practice to focus and also to focus on writing. And but do continue to teach at the University of Denver, University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and Saybrook University.
And I'm Julia Falk. I am not actually a therapist. I have a diverse background, and I guess I'm the only non-therapist that was involved in the project. But my interests are therapeutic, and I teach mindfulness and focusing and some other somatic modalities. And I find it very easy and meaningful to approach that from an existential humanistic perspective. And I like narratives. So that's what brought us together.
Yeah.
Thank you. Would you mind sharing some about the inspiration behind this book project, and maybe some about what it was like to edit this project?
Yeah, well, this is a book I had thought about for a number of years, and some of the early thoughts about it were actually in China. I remember walking with Ed Schneider there, and we were talking some about our stories and our journeys, and conversations with Kirk Schneider, Mark, Shui Fu Wang, and others, and thought there was just some interesting commonalities that including early exposure to death and other difficult experiences, interest in literature, and so really started to get interested in what are the kind of unique things that draw people towards this approach. It also interested me that a number of people came from similar areas in kind of the middle of the United States, more rural areas, quite a few people that were drawn towards this approach. So I had been thinking about it for quite a while, but really felt like needed someone with good narrative experience that would be able to collaborate and take the lead on the project. And so Julia had that, used narrative methods for her dissertation, and so we began talking about it, and it kind of took shape from there. And well, I guess with the editing process, it was a really enjoyable editing process. I've edited a number of books, and always enjoy aspects of them, and there's always some difficult, painful aspects. This was a bit different because it was just, to me, there's something exciting and really drew me in with the different chapters as they came in, because it was getting to know people, and it was people I already knew, but getting to know them in a different way, on a deeper level, and how their personal story led them to being in this shared space of existential humanistic psychology.
People really told their stories from the heart. And there was certainly a lot of academic experience that was depicted, but so much heart that really would get edited out of a lot of other kinds of publications.
Yeah.
So it was really nice to be able to include that.
I recall that this book took place during COVID, so it seems like a dream, perhaps.
Yeah.
I see you smiling. So
Well,
must be some stories there.
I have to smile because we started out thinking we had a tight deadline, kind of. We said, we think we can do this in 6 months.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got the contract signed, and we didn't really have any trouble attracting people to the project. They almost all said yes. And as soon as they did, COVID struck. And everyone's world was turned upside down. You know, some of the younger writers were stuck at home with little kids and trying to help their kids do the schoolwork, and older writers couldn't go out because they didn't want to catch it, and it really slowed down the process. And we felt like because of our humanistic values, you know, we were not going to be tough-nosed about it. We had to be able to allow people to take care of themselves and still finish the project. So it ended up taking 2 years.
Yeah.
And COVID wasn't done yet, but we managed, you know, to come in. So yeah, that was a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I hadn't thought about this actually until much later, but death was one of the themes that was common as I talked with people before we started on this project that drew the interest in it. And this was kind of riding in the face of our mortality. As we were writing our stories during a time when a lot of us were experiencing deaths and fears of deaths and an increased awareness of death. And so I'm certain that had an impact on the project in some ways, and certainly intensified the meaning around it, as we often talk about in existential psychology.
It also gave us an opportunity to be kind to each other. I don't know, it was palpable. It was just really palpable that we were all in the same boat, you know, and supporting each other, whatever they needed.
Yeah.
By the way, everyone, this is Mark Yang. I'm the voice behind the interview. And as one of the contributors, I must say I was stuck in China during that period. And then it was away, and I couldn't come back to the U.S. So reading the stories of my friends and colleagues, like Lou said, helped me to get to know them better. But it's also a way for me to, through the stories, to help me to connect with the community, even though I was so far away. So earlier, Shawn talked about the book bringing some healing for him. Reading the stories helped me to establish connections that was meaningful for me throughout COVID. So thank you.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that we were very intentional about, too, that I think made it unique in the storytelling, but also given the context of the situation, is we wanted to have people from different cultural backgrounds, different stages in their career, and so it gives a glimpse in interesting ways of how people face COVID, in a sense, although that's more at that implicit level, but it gives a sense of the different paths that people have to come to a similar place with some shared aspects across there, but there's also some very important, unique aspects, including having people who contributed from various different countries.
Great. Lous and Julia, would you mind sharing a story or a little bit in each of your chapters that the students, readers might anticipate when they read the book?
I loved all the chapters. Every story was unique. The paths that led people to where they ended up, and who knows where they're headed, but those paths were all very unique and maybe not predictable. There was so much, I ran across this and that caused me to think that, and just being redirected into a whole new area just by chance encounters, almost, usually characterized by kindness. So that was really wonderful. And in my own personal story, Lous and I decided, to share short versions of our own stories. I talked about coming from a different background and not actually being a therapist, but I teach mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is therapeutic work, and I was so impressed by the degree of suffering that people brought to the courses that I teach. I was really touched by that. And when I was studying at Saybrook, And I got introduced to Rollo May and his letters with Carl Rogers and the work with Jason Diaz and Lewis. It was that deep respect for human suffering that drew me to EH psychology. And, you know, I really find a home there.
Yeah. In reading through a lot of the chapters, one of the things I loved was how the role that literature played for so many people. And as I was going through my own story, thinking about it, first of all, is very healing in ways, because though I had thought about this for years, sitting down and actually writing it changes it in ways. And that's part of why we included in there some prompts and guides for helping people write their own. But as one of the things that I really reflected on was the different influences that brought me. And for me, some of it was music, but certainly a lot of the compassionate. When I was in undergrad, I was taught very thoroughly that CBT is the way to go. It's if you want to make it in the field, CBT. And when humanistic came up, it was mostly poking fun at it. And I never heard of existential psychology in my entire undergraduate program. And when I got to graduate school, I applied, looked at CBT programs because that was basically all my exposure. But it just didn't feel right and resonate until actually a roommate of mine, Brad Robinson, he wanted to do an independent study on existential and interpersonal psychotherapy. And I was short of class that term, trying to figure out what to take, and so I decided to take it with him, and it transformed everything. But as I look back at the things that had influenced me in the direction of existential humanistic psychology, it was not anything in psychology. It was life experiences, it was music and philosophy. Those were the things that paved the way, along with just a love for people's stories. And that's still something that I love, is being able, it's such an honor and privilege to be a therapist and be able to listen to such intimate details of people's stories and help them make sense out of it. So there's a lot of parallels between writing these chapters and doing therapy.
Thank you. Finally, as we come to the end, I'd like to ask you to give a blessing to the readers, many of which are on their own existential humanistic journeys, but as editors, as elders in their field, perhaps a little further along, I'd just like to ask you to give a blessing to the readers.
Well, becoming an existential humanistic therapist, I love the title of it because it is a process of becoming. And so we're not just telling the stories, but we're inviting people to it. And it's a unique journey, whereas in so many approaches to therapy, it's about learning techniques and these other things. But becoming an existential humanistic therapist is a process of becoming not just who you are as a therapist, but who you are as a person. And so it's a very personal, sacred journey. And so I guess the blessing that I would like to wish is a blessing on your own personal, sacred journey to becoming who you are as an existential humanistic therapist.
And I think for me too, the words becoming and journey are the two standout terms from both the title of the book, but also from all of the narratives that were included in the book. And I would just wish for everyone to hold themselves open to all the possibilities and all the potentials that might come their way on their journey, and wish them every blessing.
Hi, my name is Shawn Rubin, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and existential humanistic therapist in private practice in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And I was so grateful to be asked to contribute to this book on becoming an existential humanistic therapist. It was a profoundly personal and moving journey to contribute. I shared things about my life and myself that I've never written anywhere else. And it was profoundly healing to do so. And I feel it helped to give some context for how existential humanistic psychology and therapy helped to heal me personally, helped to provide a vocation, and to live a life of service to others as a therapist. And so I think you'll find a lot of meaningful stories and journeys of many psychologists perhaps you've read about already, their personal journey, their professional development, and how you can walk a similar path. And so I hope you'll get a lot of meaning and pleasure from these journeys and see your own story reflected in it, and add your own journeys to ours and join us in a global existential humanistic family of service. So enjoy and good reading to you all.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nathaniel Granger, Jr., past president of American Psychological Association, Division 32, Society for Humanistic Psychology, and adjunct faculty at Saybrook University. My journey to becoming an existential psychotherapist begins with me not choosing existentialism, but rather it choosing me. Many of us are drawn to the path of least resistance, never questioning the meanings of life's pitfalls, potholes, detours, and accidents along its proverbial highway. Often finding oneself at an impasse when confronted with a fork in the road, we would rather turn back to less optimal conditions and contend with the knife at our backs that had been intensely nudging us all along than to venture blindly down any of the less traveled roads afforded by the fork. And although some will contemplate going left or right, the road leading to becoming an existential psychotherapist is the road most often not chosen at all. We typically don't want to choose this road. It is not the road on which one sets out to travel, in that there are no signs, no painted lines, no apparent lights, and for the most part, no rules. This road is not smooth with a pavement of absolutes and indisputable theorems. And instead of asphalt, you will find dirt, gravel, mud, and many hard rocks. Nevertheless, this road, though mostly unassuming, is not far from one's chosen path. In fact, it runs parallel to the road we're already on, much like the service road next to the interstate highway. We rarely notice this road, let alone choose it. But rather, when the paved road, with all of its directional signs and its painted straight lines, no longer serves us, the road to existentialism chooses us, beckoning a search for meaning in the meaningless. Albeit, most will stay on the current road indefinitely, stuck in traffic. But the service road, as it were, it calls out to only those less fearful to take it. Camus said, "I rebel, therefore I exist." When considering the journey to becoming an existential psychotherapist, I must surmise that a great deal of the decision-making process was out of a desire to resist authority, control, or convention. I would speculate that rebelliousness coerced me to jump off the interstate highway onto the service road of existentialism. From the time I was born, I rebelled, not in an amoral sense or an anarchic sense, but rather one of not wholly ascribing to the beliefs of others about the world, human behavior in general, and me specifically, notwithstanding the manifestation of God. And so it was out of rebellion that I found myself giving in to the beckoning of existentialism and thus becoming an existential psychotherapist. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kirk Schneider. I'm currently president of the Existential-Humanistic Institute in the Bay Area. I'm an adjunct faculty at Saybrook University and formerly at Teachers College, Columbia University in New York. I have written or co-written some 15 books right now. Can't keep track of all of them, but I love writing. And I'm so glad to have this opportunity to connect with you all about this wonderful book that describes the backgrounds of a number of us existential humanistic therapists. And I can tell you and share a part of what I wrote in the book. Yeah, I feel like I was introduced to psychology at 2.5 years old, because that was the time when my 7-year-old brother died of a series of diseases that attacked his heart over a 10-month period. And really, to say it more clearly, I feel like I was introduced to existential psychology at such an early age because of his death. And the explosion that brought about in my whole family system with my mother, my father, the complete change from the safe and familiar ways that we were connecting with each other, the playfulness with my brother, just the joy of a young family and young family life suddenly completely shattered and left me in very bad shape at that young age. On the other hand, it exposed me to questions about life and death, big picture questions that many people may not be exposed to until much later in their lives. And one of the most important things that happened to me at that time is my mother was especially tuned in to psychotherapy. And she was working with a psychoanalyst who she asked to refer another psychoanalyst to me because I was struggling so much. I had a lot of fears of dying, fears of illness, fears of monsters at my window. And I was just not doing very well with reality, actually. And so they referred me to a child psychoanalyst when I was 6 years old. I was still having emotional trouble. And that was one of the most important meetings of my life, because that therapist supported me to slowly move from a place of abject terror and paralysis to gradual intrigue, curiosity, and even wonder about this new world that I broke into. A new world of a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of possibilities. And this psychoanalyst seemed to be very centered himself. He he seemed to have been through a lot in his own life. And so he was a great model for me of somebody who had been through a lot in their own lives, and yet it was so accomplished and so humane. And so I learned through that process to be more present to myself and to others, and to ask questions, to be curious about my panic and anxiety more and more. And that was the beginning of my fascination with psychology, and especially the deeper questions of psychology that existential philosophy would pose. So I slowly moved to that whole area of thinking and of life. But I also became very interested in science fiction, and we had wonderful television shows at that time about strange creatures and strange states of mind, and I could relate to all of it. And it fascinated me, and it just stimulated more curiosity on my part. And then I had one of the most wonderful opportunities that a budding psychologist could have, and that is to be mentored by two of the founders of Existential-Humanistic Psychology, in James Bugental and his wife, Elizabeth, and Rollo May. And as a matter of fact, I'm communing with Rollo right now because just a few days ago, another great mentor of mine, Stanley Krippner, gave me Rollo's jacket. So I'm wearing it right now and feeling even more charged in having it on me. And it fits unbelievably, even though you're shorter than I am. So that's something a little different in terms of perhaps how many of you approach psychology or come into the field. I almost feel like I was born to be a psychologist because it's so deep-rooted in my life. And I feel like psychotherapy, and especially depth psychotherapy, existentially oriented therapy, that it asks big questions and that promotes deep exploration about what really matters in living, turned my life around. I literally and figuratively feel like the two major existential psychoanalytic therapies that I had in my life rescued me and have held up, well, now for some 50 years. That was the last major existential psychotherapy I had, which was in graduate school. It's over 50 years. I'm now 67. So I would say that the greatest gift that those therapies provided for me was the gift of inner freedom, a capacity to range within, as I put it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I feel like I'm so blessed to be able to be in touch with many more of my thoughts, feelings, sensations, imaginings. And that's led to a very, I think, creative, productive life as well. And to a deep feeling for my patients in relating to many of the struggles that they go through. So if I was to give you a last word in this brief taping, I would say seriously think about engaging in a deep psychotherapeutic journey with somebody that you trust and that you feel has modeled a very holistic kind of life and an ability to be in touch, to be connected with what deeply matters in their lives, and as a result are able to provide conditions for you to learn what deeply matters for you. And you will find your own vital path in living. I might call it an awe-based path, AWE, meaning the humility and wonder and sense of adventure toward living. That's what, in essence, I feel I've been granted through the wonderful work of these therapists, and also my parents and my mother. As much as she struggled, and as painful as it was for all of us in those early years, she's a hero of mine. She was one of the first radio and television spokespeople in Cleveland, where I grew up. And so a pioneering woman. And my father was a humanistic educator who eventually became a professor of education. And he actually turned me on to people like Rollo May and Carl Rogers, Maslow, when I was 4 or 5 years old. And then we had many subsequent discussions about it. So I'm extremely blessed to have that background, and also have had to deal with some very challenging times, including the very early death of my father when I was a very young man. But all of these people have been wonderful witnesses in my life that have helped provide this gift of inner freedom, which I hope that you all will find through this journey of existential psychology and philosophy. My warmest, deepest wishes for you to find an awe-based life. Discovery, adventure, and possibility. Ever becoming and creating. Thank you.